Hey, it's Sarah again. I wanted to talk to you just real quick about another aspect of working on the panel switch that I kind of haven't yet gone over in some of the other videos. So, this being a working machine throughout its whole life, it was modified quite a bit. As new things came out, they added to it. As old things stopped being useful, they removed them. So part of understanding the life of this machine and the history of it and the bigger picture is sort of understanding what happened to it during its life. By the time it was removed from service, it was a very different looking machine than it was when it went into service. And part of the fun of what I do here is I kind of get to do a bit of archaeology. And sort of peel back the layers, I guess, to see where the history is in this machine. Now, one of the things I've been doing a lot of lately is taking off paint off these frames to see what's underneath. Now, the panel switch was originally all black, and it was painted a couple times during its useful life, and this is probably true of all panel switches, but definitely true of this one. I have seen on most of the frames that have been painted 3 layers of paint. There's the original black, which is a japanned finish. Then there's usually a silver, kind of an iridescent shiny silver, which was put on in the 30s, or possibly early 40s. And then finally there is the gray that we see for most of our machine. And that gray was likely put on after 1956. And I know that because when I pulled the paint off of one of the frames, I saw that someone had scrawled their initials in the frame and dated it. And that was in the black paint, not in the gray. So it told me that it had to have been painted gray, obviously, after that person did that. But anyway, there's kind of a struggle I have when I'm working on this. And the big question that I think a lot about is it better to preserve it the way it was when it came to the museum as it was when it was taken out of service? Or is it better to return it to its, as close as I can get it to the state when it was brand new? And there are different schools of thought there, and you might feel one way or the other, and I can kind of see why. So, on one hand, leave it how it is. The present state of the machine is kind of a culmination of all of the different stages it's been through in its life. So there's that. And then on the other side, you kind of have, if I want to present this switch in its most original form, I have to do everything I can to bring it back to the way it was maybe in the 1920s or maybe in the early 1930s, because that would have been its most basic and bare bones and original form. Kind of like some people restore cars and turn them into wild, crazy hot rods that are very little like the original car, and then some people restore cars to like kind of the day it rolled off the factory assembly line. So there's just 2 different schools there. So after doing a lot of thinking, this was a while ago, I sort of came to the conclusion that I would like to restore the look and feel of this machine to the 1920s, but I didn't want to erase the wear and tear and the human element of its existence, of its life. Because one of the things that makes this so beautiful to me is that you can see evidence of people really, really using it, interacting with it. There are frames where people did math equations on the framework because they didn't have a piece of paper. There are parts of it where people attach tags that with jokes or things to remind their coworkers of. And like I said before, there's places where people may have scrawled their initials or all kinds of stuff. And that's not even including just the wear and tear of people rubbing their hands on things and getting, having the shiny sort of metal or steel or brassy surface of constant interaction. So I kind of came to this middle ground. I wanted to paint the black frames black, but I didn't want to do it perfectly. I wanted to kind of let the age of the machine show through and not try to be perfect about it. So that's what I'm doing. It's kind of hard when you're painting something to intentionally not be perfect, but also not make it look bad. But it's a really fine line that I try to walk between, oh my gosh, this looks brand new, and oh my gosh, this looks like old, and sort of preserving the history inherent in the framework of the machine. So these frames to my left are some of the oldest frames in the office, and they were originally black. They were painted gray, again, I assume sometime in the 1950s or 60s. And I want to bring them back to their original black color. Now, in doing that, I really can't just put a coat of black paint over the gray. And I can't do that because underneath this gray are stencils and markings that I need to preserve, or that I want to preserve. Because a lot of times what they did, and this set of frames is a great example, is when they took equipment out because it was no longer needed, they just painted over the stencils, and they said, okay, it's not there anymore. But you can, I've learned a lot about the machine from peeling back this paint and looking at the original stencils, and every time I do that, I learn something new that wasn't in the original drawings or wasn't in any of the manuals. So that's what I'm doing here. Now, as I peel back this paint, I tried a few different methods of taking the gray paint off these frames, and it turns out the best one by far is not sandpaper, it's not a grinding wheel, it's not paint thinner, it's packing tape. I'll show you what I mean. If I put this down and we look at this area right here, this is obviously still gray, but let's see if I can take this gray off. And there you go. That actually wasn't as easy as some of the other parts were. It does take a little bit of patience. But the nice thing about it is, it doesn't smear or remove the layers beneath. It just removes this top layer of gray. And if I can't get it off completely, that's okay, because I'm happy as long as I can get it off enough to see the original stencils underneath. So there it is, and that's just one small area. So I'll be doing the entire frame this way and going through a lot of packing tape, and I'll probably make someone really mad at me when they need tape, but oh well. So just as an example of some of the cool stuff that I found by doing this, I'll move the camera and show you what I did tonight. So this is the frame I'm talking about, and once again, this was all gray, and it's getting closer to black now. And this was labeled, the gray was labeled in black, just like this is. I haven't done this one yet. But now that I've done that, I can read the original stencils. And they may be really scratchy and kind of faded, but it's good enough that I can figure out what they say. And then there were some more stencils right here that are also really hard to see, but I still know what it says. And then here, 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 and all the way up to the top. So this is equipment that's actually been removed, and this had been painted over 2 times. It was painted over once with black, and then once again with gray. And when I removed the gray, I got down to a black coat of paint, and then I saw that there was some orange vermilion poking through. And when I saw that, I figured out that, oh yeah, they must have just removed this equipment and then painted black over it and called it a day. So then I took this black paint is actually really hard to get off with the Scotch tape method, but then I took a razor blade and slowly, gently scraped away at that outer layer of black until I got down to this. So what I'll probably do, and I'm not sure yet, but what I'll probably do is I may elect to repaint this just to make it look nice, but if I do so, I will actually re-stencil this exactly like this is. One of the cool things about this frame in particular is that I do actually have a drawing for the framework, and in this drawing it gives us a clue as to how the frame was originally supposed to be stenciled. Now in this case it doesn't have everything that was on there, but it does have some of it. And if we flip the drawing over to the side and we zoom in, we can see many, if almost all, of the stencils that would have been there before they painted it gray. So anything, at least in this part, that was smudged or wiped out, we can reconstruct. And of course there are other stencils on the frame that aren't on this drawing that I do need to put back, but this is a great start. Another cool thing that I found while I was working on this was these indicator cards. As you can see in this photo, they're mounted in these little brackets, but when I took the brackets off to repaint this whole assembly, I found that the original cards were, in some cases, still beneath. And I had no idea that these brackets were added later. I thought they were just original. So I saved as much of the original cards as I could, but not all of them were in great condition. So I decided, after thinking about it for a while, that I could just type up new ones on my typewriter and then shellac them right back onto the frame. And I think these look a lot better in real life than they do in this photo. So you can kind of see this discoloration here. It's not really visible if you look at it with the naked eye. And I'm really, really satisfied with how it turned out, because I think it's pretty true to how the original cards would have looked before they were destroyed by layers of paint and those card holders being placed over them. Unfortunately, I don't have too many great pictures of the finished product yet, but it's a constant work in progress, so hopefully I'll post something at some point. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Take care.